Hello and welcome to Movie of the Year, the only podcast on the internet that has the science and the screaming to determine what is the single greatest movie of any given year. My name is almost said podcast. This is we've already determined this is the greatest podcast
it's this
of
one.
this year. But we have to figure out what is the greatest movie of any given year. That year is 1984. That movie tonight is Nightmare on Elm Street, and this movie Nightmare is the last movie we're doing from 1984.
Don't say it. I can't face it.
It's because we'll all die by the end of this episode.
Yeah, well, I mean, podcasting and dreaming for me is basically the same. So stay away from me, Fred Krueger.
Fred Krueger.
My name is Ryan. I'm going to be your host for tonight. Tonight, as always, is half film analysis, half game show. My panelists, whoever they may be, and the audience has no idea at this point, are going to compete with each other and sort of me to get points. They get points based on how they talk about the movie, how they make me chortle, and their compliments to me and themselves. Tonight, we're going to award points for self-compliments, and if you fall into that trap, you're an idiot and deserve the negative points. Let's get to our panelist first. He is the pinky blade on my eternal glove of dream death. It's Greg.
Hey,
Pinky's
Ryan.
out.
Pinky's out for Fred Krueger. Let's give it up, ladies and gentlemen, for Fred Krueger.
So happy to have you here, Greg.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here, Ryan. I'm glad, when you are going to really get into a horror movie, I'm the guy you call.
And if I lived on Elm Street and you came to visit me, I would say, oh, look, it's Greg. This is not a Nightmare on Elm Street.
No. Yeah, because the one thing about Greg, I'm going to be gone in 45 minutes, hour tops. Like, you never have to put up with me for very long. I come by, I drink a couple sodas, I head out.
You know what's crazy is that Greg leaves so fast, and then we go to sleep, and then all of a sudden we're almost dead in our dreams. Did he have to go and prep to kill us in our dreams?
No, that's because you have a carbon monoxide leak in your house. And I've been telling you about that. You have to you can't, as response to that, just go to sleep.
Well, what I've been doing with the leak is if I put my thumb on it, then it sprays all over the house evenly.
Spreads it out. Yeah.
Also on tonight's show is the alcoholic mother that I've always wanted, but hopefully sunlight will break his alcoholism soon. It's Mike.
Glug, 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 glug. Hi, guys. First time, long time. Happy to be here.
I thought your catchphrase was just going to be the glugs.
Glug, 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 glug.
You added the hi guys at the end.
I think I drank as realistically as she did. So,
Man, this was like after school special drinking. She'd like pull out a full handle of vodka.
No, not vodka. It was like vanilla liqueur.
Oh, really?
It was like it was the weakest.
Okay,
like,
wait. Then is
child
she in
shit.
middle school? What the
When I think of like real problem drinkers, like hidden alcohol drinkers, I always think vodka because isn't that the problem drinkers drink?
Yeah,
That's
what
When
I
they're
always
not drinking
say.
beer.
That's like the least amount of stink you get, right?
I mean, yeah, the way that we drink it, no. But for most people, yes.
Well, we also mix beef jerky in it.
I'm so excited to have you two here. And I think I have my most horror-loving friend and my least horror-loving friend. And so many people would say to me, you only have two friends. Isn't that the case for literally everything? And I would say I have so many more friends than two friends. Right,
Yeah.
guys?
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Shut
so
up,
many.
nerds. How many friends do you have in your adulthood, person?
It's hard to make friends.
Honestly, we've got really good friends, though. I would say we've got Cassie.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Caitlin.
Producer Dave.
Producer Dave. I don't know. We may not maybe
Friend of the
roll
show,
with
Taylor.
friend of the show, Taylor.
This is
Taylor's
Greg
amazing.
stalling on talking about this horror movie.
I'm scared.
He's
to
I just don't want to
talk
think of it.
about
Yeah, he's wrapping himself up into the security blanket of friendship.
No, Ryan, do you want to ask me what I thought about the movie?
I was debating on which one of you to go first because obviously whoever talks first is going to
Win the game.
Persuade. In the game of talking about your feelings of Nightmare on Elm Street, you win or you die. The other one's going to persuade the other one. So I'm going to say, yes, Greg, what are your feelings on Nightmare?
Okay, I have no history with this movie at all.
Any of them?
But it wasn't one of the ones that like scared me to even think about. I just never considered it because they were scary and they tended to be rated R. So this is my first experience with it, and I will say 100% absolutely not for me. But I think there's a lot of really interesting ideas in this movie, and I think there are some high points. I just think most of the really good ideas are like sort of unexplored. There's too many of them. There's not a lot of follow through. And the bad parts of this movie are like, I don't know. By the second time I watched it, I was like, I can't understand what's camp and not camp anymore. Like, but
Well, camp is Friday the 13th.
And
Yeah.
and this is House.
Right.
This is called House.
But
And-
I do think there were a lot of interesting points and a lot of interesting ideas. I just didn't think it really cohered in a way that created a great experience for me.
Because we're 40 years removed, it's also hard to tell what was camp and not camp at the time.
Yes.
When this came out, my history with the franchise, I can't tell you which one, but I know I watched a bunch of these when I was like 7, because me and my siblings would just be in a hot house in Pennsylvania all day and watch whatever the fuck we wanted. And
Now, hot house, that's what Pennsylvanians call whorehouse, yes?
yes, yeah. Well, the parentals were doing their work or paying. And
I
we
was
were all-
imagining you were in like a glass enclosure that would let in the sun, but
A greenhouse.
yeah,
a greenhouse. Somebody put a TV in the greenhouse.
and that's where we would go.
Somebody put a TV, I know. And so I watched so many horror movies as a kid, and a lot did give me The Exorcist and The Omen as a young age gave me nightmares. Scream gave me nightmares, even though I was at that point 4th grade, which is like, wait, you should be going to rated R movies alone at that point, right? But at no point has Freddy ever scared me because he's a fucking cartoon. Steamboat Willie, the groundskeeper in The Simpsons, is scarier as Freddy than Freddy is.
Wait, do you mean Groundskeeper Willie? The
Groundskeeper Willie.
Steamboat Willie
Steamboat
is
Willie.
much scarier. And public domain now. So
Doot. Yeah. So he'll be killing people really soon.
he's going to fight Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey very soon. So I sort of agree that for my entire life, I've always thought of Freddy Krueger as along the same lines as the Crypt Keeper. Like, you look gross, but
Yeah.
come on, you're basically Bugs Bunny with a burnt face. Right?
He's always like doing like a little hop and like
Yeah, and this is him tame and scary. He
Yes.
will become true Looney Tune on the future when he just calls everybody bitch and like does a lot of puns. That's when he's. There's a certain point where he's like, I gotta compete with Leprechaun in the Hood. No, you don't, man. You got your own thing going on.
But growing up, I was not a Nightmare on Elm Street kid. I was not really a horror kid. But growing up, I hung out with so many people who, like, somebody would say, like, my favorite part of Nightmare 2 is when this happened. And then the other person would be like, oh, that's from Nightmare 3, The Dream Warriors, you piece of shit. It's like,
You big
how do you
stupid
keep
idiot.
these movies straight? Like, not only did you watch them, but you know what happened in each one.
yeah,
Like,
you can keep him.
they're just a series of set pieces. And Mike, I'm not sure if we totally got where you fall in this movie, but I am sort of close to thinking that this movie is fan-fucking-tastic.
Really, there's gonna be one every episode.
I think this might be the Amadeus of our generation.
I can't think of a movie, because I have a bad memory, more designed for a high school house party.
Oh,
than this,
gosh,
where
yeah.
it's there's so many, we don't need to pay attention now, let's make out or talk about who's making out. Oh, now we should watch this part.
I totally
But-
disagree.
I don't mean that derogatorily.
Yeah, okay.
Each movie brings its own expectations and goals, and I think this movie, just like its main teens want to fuck, this movie wants the viewers to fuck as well.
And Mike's way of fucking is to have sex, and then when there's a set piece, go, wait, stop.
Stop. I like to bring it into the room where I also cut my nipple open to see how many maggots are in there.
Oh man,
How many?
2.
Yeah, usually 2.
A normal amount.
Yeah.
just 2 fall out. Then you're fine. You don't need to go to the doctor.
Honestly,
for
people are
that.
scared of more maggots than that, but I would be worried about less or fewer.
Watching it, I did the whole time. I kept going back and forth between like, this is bad, and then I was like, but is there an element of genius to this? And I think
Yes.
I think a lot of the ideas are genius level ideas, and I think that the movie carves out a space for itself that's entirely unique, especially having a villain that, like, when it comes right down to it, like, they do something to blunt the terror of him every single time he appears, even though he's doing gross things and trying to murder them and stuff. And then the weird thing is they cut to what's really going on in the real world, and that shit looks scary.
It reminds
very
me of-
purposefully so.
Yeah, that shit looks scary as hell. When, like, the chick starts floating around and stuff, that's scary.
The incompetent bad guy reminds me of the movie that first did that ever. The first horror movie to ever do that, and that's Scream. This guy's just fucking ripping it off. I cannot believe that he's doing this.
I also felt like it took a little liberally from Home Alone.
I
You
did
know?
not remember that at all.
That whole Home Alone sequence,
Yeah,
yeah.
she Home Alone's
With-
the shit.
but
out of
with
her
no
house.
montage showing
No.
how she built all that. Like, she just had that on the ready.
Where's the
Guy-
Michael Jordan stand-up?
Well, first they tip it. She's reading the book
Yeah,
improvise-
she is reading the anarchist
improvised traps, right? And then she comes up with a plan, and the movie doesn't quite sit on it enough, but the plan is, I'm going to grab this guy in my dream, pull him into this world, and then when he's like all discombobulated from being here, I'm going to run him into a sledgehammer and blow him
Is
up.
that okay, Daddy? Do you understand, Daddy?
One of the coolest things this movie does is Nancy, day 2, goes, I know what's going on, and just starts researching instead of being like, what? I don't know. Like, and then it's her against the world.
All right, this intro is wildly
Sorry,
out
it's
of
so
control.
hard.
We're talking about the movie. We don't even give a shit.
We are not supposed to be talking about the movie right now. Mike, good movie or bad movie?
Good movie.
Okay. So we are going to fight about this movie for the next, I don't know, the movie's 90 minutes, so let's do 3 hours tonight?
Yeah.
When we come back, A Nightmare on Elm Street. As much has been written about how A Nightmare on Elm Street came to be as about the movie itself, let's say. Prove that it hasn't. That's what I thought. Craven has said that he based the idea of the movie on Hmong refugees who, after surviving the Khmer Rouge, died during nightmares years later. He's also said that the song Dream Weaver gave him the idea not just for the movie, but also for the music in the movie. Craven claims to have been bullied by a kid named Fred Krueger and named 2 characters in his film, The Last House on the Left, Fred and Crew. He also may have had heavily based the movie on his 1968 student film, which was, in true Craven fashion, a parody of contemporary horror films. But also, knowing Craven, some or even all of these stories could be absolute bullshit. So let's just talk about the plot. A Nightmare on Elm Street takes place in a sleepy suburban town that has a terrible past. When a group of teenagers begins to get iced by a mysterious man who can kill them in their dreams, which also kills them in real life, it will come down to Final Girl Hall of Famer Nancy, played by Heather Langenkamp, to figure out who the killer is, who the killer was, and how to stop them. That killer, of course, is Freddy Krueger, bitch, played by Robert Englund. Freddy would go on to become one of the 1980s most iconic creations, spawning sequels, ripoffs, remakes, Jason battles, 2 Bollywood derivatives, and an American porn parody called, of course... Gentlemen?
A Nightmare on Fuck Street.
Nightmare on Cum Street.
You guys are thinking about this wrong word here.
A night...
Sex mare on Elm Street.
A night mom on Elm Street.
A night mom stuck in the Elm dishwasher. A wet dream on Elm Street. Nightmare on Elm Street is one of the seminal films in that great 80s tradition.
Seminal films.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nancy. Kids rule, parents drool. Does the movie show us that the true villain is, has been, and always will be the generation gap?
Well, I don't know if it's the generation gap. I mean, it explores that because there's like the kids don't know about the history with Fred Krueger, and so they're not like equipped to understand what's going on. But what I really felt in this movie was just the absolute dereliction of duty on behalf of the parents, and it reminded me, like so many other things, of Reagan's view of government, right? Like the parents just retract into their own worlds. The mom just drinking all the time, and so they're like no presence in the kid's life. And if anything, the mom, which we could spend a long time talking about, like what's really up with her, because she almost feels like partially the villain in this, but the mom, everything she does imperils Nancy to a horrible degree. There's
and
nothing
when Nancy complains, she's on the couch going, no.
That is
your own guy.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, the most personality she has is when she's sassy and half passed out, being like, yeah, I locked you and am going to drug you to fall asleep.
Yeah.
Bitch.
Bitch. Is she Freddy Krueger?
She's Freddy Krueger.
But and so she's the one who locks Nancy in the house, right? And that's so Nancy can't escape at the end. But also, she like kept Freddy's glove.
Yeah.
And she's like, I know what to do with this. I will just put this in our own furnace. It feels very much like, I don't know, like there's more going on there, and it's kind of enticing the way the movie doesn't fully get into it.
While gaslighting Nancy, and I know that word's overused, but I think in the here is because she's like, I had this dream, and my friends had this dream about this burnt guy named Fred Krueger with knife hands, and mom's like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
This is so weird. Anyway.
And when I was younger, I would see a detail like that in a movie, and I would think like that's very unrealistic. Why do these adults have brain damage? Why can't they like get involved in this? But the truth
And they
is,
do. It's the paint chips.
Yeah,
it's
it's the
denial.
lead
It's
liquors.
It's just like it's the human brain's
Mike.
power to just deny the things that it doesn't want to have to deal with. And that's kind of mirrored in how powerful dreams are in this.
If we don't look at our past, if we don't invite maturity or the real world, the horrors of the real world into our children's lives, they will stay kids forever. While like they're still pieces of shit. It's not just the Freddy stuff they're shitty at. All the parents suck in so many ways. They don't like the one, and I agree. I also don't like Rod, but not just because he's a musician. There's so many reasons I don't like him. But Johnny Depp's mom is like, psh, Nancy's been acting so nervous lately. I don't want her hanging out with our son.
Right.
You mean Nancy, who 2 of her best friends just died? That's why she's acting nervous?
Yeah.
What the fuck? And her stupid dickhole husband is like, you just got to slam the phone on these kids who watch their friends die. What the
Nancy,
fuck?
did you just watch your friends die? Get off the phone. And then, just hang it up and then go back and say, like, that's not good enough. Then leave it off the hook. Something that we used to be able to do back in the day.
To disconnect.
Yeah, but also, though, this movie shows the way that, and modern kids don't have to deal with this, but sometimes somebody would call you and then their whole tongue would come out of the phone and kind of lick your mouth. And I don't miss those days.
I do. I mean,
I'm
it's
your
gross,
boyfriend
but I
now,
miss
Nancy.
that tactile experience.
Let's talk about, I think that the mom is one of the most fascinating, Nancy's mom is one of the most fascinating parts of this movie because the performance is, I would say, one of the worst that we've ever experienced in the history of this podcast.
It is, right? Like, that's not part of her, but is that part of her character?
But let's remember something. She is a divorcee. And who was her ex-husband?
The guy from the Bruce Lee movie,
Enter the Dragon. That is true. So Greg just ruined a trivia question. But
the chief of police?
He's the chief of police.
Who's
probably beat the shit out of her.
Bad cop and a worse dad. So he's certainly not a great husband.
All right, now you're pitching taglines for his solo movie.
He's a bad cop and a worse dad.
So, yeah, I can see how, why did she just start drinking out of nowhere? Was it because of the damage that she did to this child murderer in her past? Was it because of the divorce? Was it because she had such a baby that looked so much like the 80s in Nancy? Like, that chick is just the 80s walking around, going to school and stuff.
But see, here's what's going to really cook your noodle. Greg, obviously she's a bad mom, and obviously the dad's a bad dad. But doesn't that open the door for Nancy to become the best version of herself and to realize that she really does have if she does, I feel like the end of this movie kind of unspools, it's kind of hard to rationalize every part of this movie without understanding exactly what the end means, if it does mean anything. But setting that aside, it feels like Nancy prevails in this, right? And what reservoir of power does she draw on? It feels like the fact that she has only herself and that she doesn't have the guidance of parents, that maybe that empowers her in a weird way.
Are these parents
and that's why
boomers?
I feel well, yes, right? Timeline
1940, they were probably born in 1940ish, so they might be slightly below boomers, but
they might be silent, which
older.
They should be a little more.
But I do think there's that thing of I want you to be a better version of me, but I don't. I actually don't.
Yeah,
and I want to keep you controlled for as long as possible.
Yeah, it's Nancy. I feel so bad for Gen Z and Gen Alpha because the latchkey kids are the best people because they've had to learn how to take care of themselves since they were 8 years old.
Yeah.
And when you learn you can't rely on anybody, you're always going to be strong.
That's such a big jump where we go from Mike's thinking about the movie in life to Mike's actual childhood. Of
No, what?
They literally sent us home from school on our own to a house that had a computer hooked up to the internet.
And said, I'll be home 4 hours after
4
you get home
hours?
from school.
No, worst case scenario.
What's the kid going to do? Download one fucking JPEG in 4 hours to jerk off to?
Oh, shit. It took me all night, but I got this frame of Cameron Diaz in The Mask, and it's all mine. So many horror movies have actors that read in their mid-20s. What's the effect that of how young Nancy and her friends feel in this film? Do you guys feel their youth here?
Yes.
They're babies.
They are babies, especially because it's hard to not compare to Scream. And those are, to quote Taylor Swift, sexy babies in Scream. At that point, you're playing with everybody looks older than they are because they are older, right? And these kids could believably be in high school. And so anytime they're swearing, you're like, don't use that language, guys. You're just children.
And another thing they do is
or fuck.
it's so interesting because the movie is about layers of reality, but the costuming is so realistic. This is the most realistic costuming we've had so far in the season, and I include Amadeus because nobody really dressed like that in the 80s. But we think of like the leg warmers, we think of the headbands, right? But the way these kids dress, like little baby kids who are going to high school, that's the way people dress in the 80s, really. Yes. It's just jeans and a sweater. That's all it is.
I guarantee you that every one of these kids at their age, not but 2 months ago before the school year started, got taken to Mervyn's, and their moms like took clothes hangers and like put them up next to them to see if they fit.
Every single one of these kids are certified Morvin's boy, for sure.
Morvin's.
And not to say that Nancy's not pretty, because obviously she's like exceptionally pretty, but she's very much that girl next door type of pretty, and very much like not super, like, she's got a very strong brow. Her hair is, they let it kind of be frizzy and big, but it's not like permed.
It's not 80s
She's all
big.
natural. Well, it's just, she's like, just looks like a real person.
She's a Regina George makeover away from being the hottest girl you've ever seen. That's the thing, is that she's too young to know what to do. She doesn't have YouTube with all these makeup videos.
Yeah.
She's just a kid.
These kids with their YouTubes and their... I do think...
Cosby?
I'm sorry for that.
Yeah,
that
wow,
sometimes
dude.
just comes out of you.
The only thing scarier than Fred Krueger.
Bill Cosby.
At least
Billy
Fred Krueger
Cosby.
never put anything in anybody's drinks.
They both have exceptionally strong sweater game.
That's a classic.
You definitely used to have the Freddy Krueger sweater and wore it all the time as a youth.
That's probably the least shocking thing we'll hear all night.
I think why they look young, it's not just of the times, right? I think it's important that, like, this is, yes, it's a horror movie, but it is a coming-of-age story. And so you have to have your star actually look young and like a kid for them to come of age.
And I feel also like it made them seem more vulnerable. Like,
Yes.
I mean, for instance, like when she's like, I'm going to start drinking coffee to stay up. You're like, oh, you're such a little one. Don't drink.
It's going to affect your
coffee.
bones.
And then you can magnify that to when she's getting chased by a demon. You're like, oh God, this is like even scarier, right? And she's throwing herself out windows and everything. And so like, it was very effective for like, you feel more connected, you know, because you're like, this is such a little kid.
There's one point where she was at her desk drinking coffee, and then there was something next to her, and I was like, that's okay, Nancy. Now that's how you do it. That's how you're going to get a leg up. And it wasn't a mirror with stuff on it. It was just the reflection of light on the picture.
Dude, moment of the movie, and I know we never do that segment, but if we did, moment of the movie is like her mom, again, being so weird. You could spend the entire show talking about like what's the mom's real deal in this, because the mom is like, you got to get to sleep, Nancy. Hey, Nancy, get to sleep. And sometimes it seems caring. Sometimes it seems like I'm trying to freaking feed you to Freddy, my dude. But she's like, okay, Mom, I'm going to go to bed now. And the mom gets up and leaves, and then Nancy waits until the door is closed. And then she gets out of bed, and she reveals she has a hidden coffee maker currently making a pot of coffee. Just like kind of it's like kind of next to the bed under her desk or whatever. When she busted that out.
She also has a grinder right, for the beans.
Yeah. Like, she doesn't want just fucking Insta bullshit. She wants espresso.
Yeah, dude.
I had always thought that, and this is based on nothing, but I always had heard that, first of all, Freddy's mom, is this true, was raped by like 1 million inmates, and so nobody knew who his true father was?
We might learn that in that's post Dream Warriors for sure.
Okay, and then the other thing that I thought that I knew, but maybe I didn't.
But that's what he's called or something. He's called like the child of 1,000 rapes or something like that.
Right.
Something awful like that.
Bad nickname.
This is a cool nickname. Here we are on the AM radio with Johnny and the child of 1,000 rapes.
Oh, no.
And then the other thing I thought was that like he just looked weird. And that, like some sort of Steamboat Willie. And that's why the kids bullied him and basically burned his like shack down. And I thought that this was like getting the parents off too much, that he was an actual child. It was supposed to be a molester.
No, see, I think that's I think that's one of the coolest ideas, because a lot of times when we have a ghost story, actually the ghost is a victim who has been wronged, and the movie reveals
like Casper
that
the Friendly
to us. But in this like imagines a world where a very awful person is wronged. They kill him, extrajudicial killing. They burn him to death, right? And then that's the person that comes back as a ghost. The ghost usually isn't so villainous like that, and I thought that was an interesting idea.
That no good deed. It's vigilante. Like I do think, like, and maybe it's not the time. Like vigilante justice will only beget bad things.
Right.
Yeah.
Is one of the things underlying this movie for
When
sure.
you want revenge, dig so many graves.
Dig
Because there's so many graves.
For your kids. Dig
Yes, your
smaller
children.
graves because you're killing your kids, vigilantes.
Not like
It's-
toddlers, but like teenage-sized graves.
And it's interesting because the parents, and I understand all kids are our kids, especially back then when community actually existed, not like these days. The parents who are all involved, their kids were not the ones being killed, right? They were just like, well, mob mentality, let's do this. Seems like a fun thing to do on a Saturday night.
Yeah, they never
And
said
so
like one of our
so
gang's
unreliable.
little sibling died.
Right.
They were like, no, we're just a random group of kids. Lynch.
And that's in every other way. The parents are so unreliable, and I don't know if the movie's saying this at all. But like, did he, or was he just a weird, creepy, smelly janitor? So they decided to kill him.
Well, that's the
because a
thing.
kid went missing.
Like there are moments of exposition in this, but they don't do a good job. Like this is not a judgment about the movie. The moments of exposition don't totally tell us the story, which is part of why the movie's so interesting, actually. Because we don't get the full history. Like, how do you know this guy? He obviously, like, she's like, well, the attorney got famous and the judge got fat, but someone forgot to sign the search warrant. That's kind of a weird story. Like, is that even true? The movie never explores that. And then they didn't just walk up and kill this guy. They like locked him in a house and burned him. It really is a terrible, awful thing they did to somebody who couldn't, or probably did kind of deserve it. Well, we don't know though.
We did see human Freddy making his gloves in the credits of the film.
Yeah.
So I don't think an innocent dude does make that kind of glove.
And also there's a way in which he loves tormenting the kids that feels very much like child murder. I feel like even though he's not a clown, I feel like there's a real like Gacy vibe to this where he's like, he loves doing it so much that like it confirms to us like, wait a minute, no, this guy really did do that.
He could kill all these kids right away, but it's
I think that's
thrill
the
of the chase.
Yeah.
Like he likes torturing first.
The playing with his food thing is such, I think, an important part of Freddy that I didn't even realize until I thought it was just like, let's stretch out the movie longer, let's make set pieces, but like it's his core character.
I also think it's multi-layered too. I think that like this little mind prison that he has set up for these people is that the movie actually argues for it being extremely deep and complex, and that like they're in it more than they realize. Like, I think that's what the end of the movie means is like you can't get out of this. Like by the time the movie starts, these people are in the hell of Freddy, and
because
they're not
there's
like
no escaping trauma, especially when you bury it. Boom.
I have to give Greg a point if you're going to drop the mic like that.
Greg.
But yeah, like I think that like that's so much of it is that we're going to move to suburbia, which is basically like our safe. Like when you're playing tag, there's like a safe zone. If you get to the suburbs, then you're safe from all other things. And then that means that you don't have to deal with anything else. And that means that you can keep your kids from dealing with anything else. So you don't have to like talk them through hard things. Like they're just all these parents. The one thing that they all have in common is that once they have kids, they're coasting. You know, like now I'm done once the birth happens, or at least they hit puberty. I'm fucking done. The one thing that I thought the movie was missing though was, and this is something that happens in the hit TV show Riverdale or the comic book Runaways.
It's so weird how much I was thinking about Riverdale during this.
I think Nightmares all over Riverdale is the parents coming together to talk about what's going on. Like we only know that Nancy's mom was involved. And I thought that we would get like this kid's dad, this kid's mom, this kid's uncle would be in on it.
See, that's kind of what the movie's about, though. Again, like the movie puts so much on the table, and I just feel like it could do a better job of like connecting things so that we understand what the movie's point is. But one of the things I think it's kind of one of the points I think it's kind of making is this did not bring people together,
right?
Like
and
none of these
all
adults,
the problems.
these adults are not joining together. They are all isolated in their individual worlds of trauma, and they're not a help to each other or anybody else because they're in hell.
And because they're in hell, not only are they isolated, self-isolating, they're peering through their windows, judging each other.
Yeah.
Even though all they need is like a friend. All they need is a hug and a talk.
I bet they're not dealing with that as good as me. Oh, I bet they're dealing with that better than me, and I hate them. Those are the two thoughts you can have when you look out the window. We have to take a break. I want to talk about Nightmare more, but I guess we have to do other shit. So when we come back, Mike is going to come in to try to redeem the segment Trivia. That's right, folks. It's Nightmare on Elm Street Trivia. You know the rules. Wait till the question has been asked, and then ring in with your name by saying your name. Don't say your name. Say your name. Do we understand?
Mike.
Yes,
No,
Mike.
Yes.
don't do the
I
joke.
understand.
Don't do the joke.
It has to
that
be
the
done,
joke?
Greg. It has to be done.
Every time we do the joke.
Producer Dave is standing to the side with a gun, so you can do that fucking joke.
Number 1. What movie studio that went on to become a mid-major was nicknamed the house that Freddy built?
Mike.
Mike?
New Line Cinema.
New Line
Mike.
Cinema.
It's going to be a long segment for the old Craigster.
This does not bode well.
Yeah, it was just about to go out of business, and after making one single movie, and their second movie boosted them to become the studio that greenlit Lord of the Rings and gave Peter Jackson $300 million. Which gigantic prop from this movie makes its second appearance in our 1984 season?
Greg.
Mike.
Greg.
The rotating room.
The rotating room.
Greg.
Maybe the best scene of the movie, but we'll talk about that later. What 1981 horror movie does Nancy watch trying to stay awake?
Greg.
Greg.
I don't know, but I think that was a really smart idea on her part, honestly. And I thought it was a great moment of meta commentary. That would be the perfect way to stay awake. That's how I would do it.
Oh, man. I love movies. I'd go to sleep immediately if I was tired. I'll go to sleep in a theater. I don't give a shit. Mike, you have a guess?
Prom night.
I'll throw out a hint. It started a lifelong relationship between this director and another where they would include stuff in each other's movies.
Greg.
Greg.
Friday the 13th?
No.
Shit.
Mike.
You name the director or the movie? Yes.
Robert Rodriguez.
No. He
It's
was
way too old.
6.
Yeah.
Watch The Evil Dead.
Evil Dead.
Evil Dead.
What gangsta actor of the early Hollywood studio days did Robert Englund base his performance on?
Ryan.
I already know the answer.
Oh, don't be a cheater. Mike.
Mike.
Warren Beatty.
Incorrect. Earlier.
Greg. Peter Lorre.
Later. It was Jimmy Cagney. Ronnie Blakely starred in Nashville before going on to appear in Nightmare on Elm Street. Who starred in the 2010 remake in the same role before going on to star in Nashville?
Whoa, Mike.
Mike.
Connie Britton.
Connie Britton is
Mike.
correct.
My nose is bleeding.
Yeah, dude, you parsed that effectively.
What magical magazine, a staple of my childhood, named Freddy Krueger the 14th greatest villain of all time?
Greg.
Greg.
Wizard Magazine?
Wizard Magazine, guys,
Yeah.
don't
Greg.
you miss it? Oh.
Yes, dude. I honestly, I don't think I appreciated Wizard enough when it was around. Magazine culture, kids, was so amazing, and
Yeah,
Wizard, they
magazines
were
rule.
having so much fun, and there was so much to publish.
We accidentally were delivered the other day a issue of Travel and Leisure, and it just went to the wrong house, and I brought it in, and me and my wife just poured over it. Like, top 100 vacation spots. And we're
It's
like,
like
look
they
at
printed the
pages.
internet.
And we smelled like cologne afterwards.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
amazing.
Very fancy.
What 2 words are never spoken in this movie?
Mike.
Mike.
Freddy, bitch.
Incorrect.
Greg.
Greg.
Immigration and abortion.
That's
Mike.
3 words, Greg. Mike.
Elm Street.
Elm Street is correct.
Oh, wow.
Mike.
What was the name of the character that kicked off the oft-copied genre that eventually led to Nightmare?
Mike.
Greg.
Mike.
Michael Myers.
Michael Myers is correct.
Nice.
What is the scariest Michael Myers movie?
Greg.
Greg.
The Love Guru.
The Love Guru
Damn
is
it.
Hell
correct.
yeah. Hell yeah.
Get
If
there.
if you
I
went
couldn't
over to
remember
someone's
the name
house,
of
they
it.
were like, we're just starting the Love Guru. That's honestly, that's nightmare stuff.
Leave.
Name 2 movies that are actually not in the same universe as the first film.
Mike.
Mike.
The final. What's that one called? New Nightmare.
New Nightmare.
And Freddy versus Jason.
Oh, incorrect.
Greg.
Yeah.
A Nightmare Before Christmas.
And?
Freddy versus Jason.
Incorrect.
A New Nightmare.
Uh-huh.
And A Nightmare Before Christmas.
That is correct. It's really almost all movies.
Mike.
Are not set in
Yeah.
that universe, yeah.
But
That
the 2
was
that I was looking for are New Nightmare and Nightmare on Elm Street 2010 with Jackie Earle Haley. Not in this role. At a movie-themed wedding we all attended, where each table had a different movie poster parody, what was the name based on this movie?
Oh, was it
Greg.
a rhyme?
Greg.
Oh.
Nightmare on Oakstone Circle.
Greg, don't say my address out
Greg.
loud.
That's what tripped me up. I was like, wait.
Really, it wasn't not knowing the answer. What was the name of the table you 2 sat at?
Oh, fuck. Mike.
I'll give you a hint. You both drunkenly chanted it the entire night. Mike?
Ryan's Besties. Wasn't a movie. Didn't make sense.
Greg?
The Big Chill.
Incorrect.
Mike?
Rhinatown. Rhinatown is correct.
Oh,
Mike.
yeah. I was so drunk. But that was the best table.
Name one other movie poster parody at that wedding.
Mike. Was the Ryan King?
There was one, yeah.
Ah, good one.
Mike.
What is the name of the remake of this movie that changes Freddy Krueger into a rabbit hunter?
Jesus Christ.
Greg.
Greg.
Nightmare on Elmer Fudd Street.
That is correct.
Greg.
Speaking of Elmer, what is the name of the closed restaurant that I missed the most?
Mike. Elmer's.
Incorrect.
Greg. Soup Plantation.
No, I do, but that's number 2 to Fuddruckers.
Fuddruckers.
A place
We
that
hardly
made
knew
its
you.
bones by having a kind of dirty sounding name. It was just fun to say you were all going to go to Fuddruckers.
What is the name of the restaurant that is themed after people who think the star of Ant-Man is hot?
Greg. Paul Ruddfuckers.
Ruddfuckers is correct.
Greg.
Greg, your
Can you
eyes
see
closed
how hard
so
I'm
hard
thinking
to
over
answer.
here, Mike?
He's going into another zone.
I'm like ringing in and then sitting here and just thinking about it with my eyes closed.
What are you doing?
as
The
hard
New
as
York
I
Times
can.
games in the morning?
I used to be pretty quick and pretty smart. Those days are over, my friends.
They're like the handles on Greg's chair are just torn to
Yeah,
shit.
dude, this is a physical effort. Like I'm
White
kind of
knuckling.
sweating.
And finally, so Greg can put the blood back in his nose. What is the name of the restaurant that is themed after people who want to give blowjobs to little creatures that live underground?
Greg.
Chud fuckers. Oh, shit.
Chud fuckers.
Incorrect.
Mike. Chud muckers.
Oh, Greg.
Chud
suckers.
Chud suckers.
Chud suckers.
Greg.
Correct.
You-
They want to
man,
give blowjobs, guys.
He said it, and then I just I
know,
couldn't
it
help but
blocked
just
out your
repeat the
brain.
exact thing he said.
That, of course, is trivia. It has been redeemed.
I think
trivia
so.
is back.
It's back, baby. Tell your friends. They figured out how to answer some of the questions this time.
When we come back, more Nightmare on Elm Street. The budget of the film was said to be about $1 million, which even back in 1984 was not a lot of money for a horror movie with this much ambition. Are there moments that still show off Craven and the crew's inventiveness and imagination 40 years later? We can get to the parts that don't show it off later, but for right now, I would like to be complimentary. What are the parts that you're like, okay, girl?
I will never not think about, and this might make my intro thing a lie of this movie never scared me. It will never not be freaky and look dope. A face and hands pushing through
Absolutely.
the wall. Fuck, it looks cool.
And even if you're like, oh, I know how they did that, even if
I
you're
don't
that
care.
guy, yeah, it's such a good idea, and you know that you can sort of put yourself back. And I think this is kind of important, right? If you're watching, 1938 or 9's King Kong or whatever, you have to put yourself back then a little bit to know that like this probably hasn't been done like this before.
For me, the kind of staggering achievement would be the using the rotating room. They use it twice, and the second time it's used twice amazingly. The first time to scarier effect, I think, when the first girl Tina is being killed in her dreams, and like in reality, it is so much scarier
Great.
what happens to you in reality instead of like what
Right.
they're seeing in the dream. She's like floating around, getting cut up and everything.
If you're in the dream, you're like in a factory. So,
Yeah.
oh.
Yeah.
Oh,
no.
pipes.
But
Steam.
that's why Freddy's great, is because it's not just to kill Tina, it's to put fear into Rod, who's in the room, and Freddy fucking knows it.
And Freddy also knows that all the cops already think that he's a murderer, so
Yeah.
this is
Well,
going
he's
to
a
put him in a
musician.
bad place.
But the real like moment of the movie for me is the using the rotating room so that the blood seems like it gushes out of the bed.
Yeah.
Is this the
Chris.
most iconic thing
Yeah.
of the movie?
I think the pushing through the wall is the most iconic thing. I think the coolest thing, or it's weird. This is not my cup of tea, this kind of stuff, but like just the effect of this, very Shining, right? When the blood
Yes.
comes pouring out of the
So much
elevator.
blood.
It is so much blood.
It's a one shining moment.
And it just looks really, really good. It looks like that is the way they conceived of
Yeah.
it when they came up with the idea, and it plays perfectly.
Look, I'm going to be honest. There was a point where 30 seconds after Johnny Depp mercifully got killed in this movie, where I was like, oh, they're using the rotating room. And then I thought, oh, Johnny Depp's mom is walking in and screaming at nothing. Like, she was just told, like, go. And then she had to. But for a solid 30 seconds, I was like, this is so fucking dope. This rules.
And because you can see with the reverse effect, right? You see it getting deeper. The blood is getting deeper on the ceiling. Like it's filling up the room from the top. Oh, it's sick.
And the density of the liquid is like perfect. The coloring is perfect. And then it's
a little slow-mo.
Yes. Yeah. It's very rich. I mean, it's like, it's weirdly beautiful because like the slow-mo of this liquid moving that way, there's something very pleasing about it. And then the music is very ominous there, like the darkest dark synth in that moment.
I think that the slow-mo has a lot to do with it too, in that like we're now supposedly supposed to be in real life. We'll get to this part later, but like the slow motion of it all is just him playing with all of the tools in his tool belt, and that's part of the thing that I really appreciate is that there are parts that, let's talk about like Ronnie Blakely's death, Nancy's mom's death, where she's covered in a burning Freddy that's covered in a sheet. And then sort of becomes just a corpse, and then goes into the bed.
Weirdly, just like suddenly the movie becomes like Poltergeist. Like there's no other element of the movie that is like this, but this very Poltergeist moment.
And again, we get to watch an adult in this case, Nancy's dad, being like, okay, I do think that weird things are going on right now.
Yeah, and then Nancy's like, I'd like a moment alone in the room, please. And then she just addresses Freddy in general. And then he comes and attacks her, and then turns into some sort of weird blue.
I love the 80s thing. The
just
disappear.
We don't know how she would actually kill him. So blue electric gremlin.
I didn't love the way the mom descending into the bed looked, but I did think that it was effectively creepy. And like I didn't. There's nothing like super impressive about like the friend in the body bag appearing a couple times, but I thought that was very effectively creepy. Like that doesn't take like a huge budget, but it shows you how like disturbing you can be with an image and not blow the budget.
I think the friend in the body bag is such a good hardcore band name. And Dream Logic, this is how a nightmare starts. I'm in class, and then my friend who just died is in a body bag, filling with blood and talking to me. Like it's that I feel like it's the exact level of scary it's supposed to be for the beginning of the movie to ramp up Nancy's terror. Because she's like scared a little, but she's like, well, I'm going to track that girl down.
Yeah.
My friends in a body bag talking to me. I better go chase her.
I read online that a lot of people thought that this movie had some Psycho-esque qualities in that Tina was clearly supposed to be the main character and then was our first death. Does that gel with you guys?
Not at all. That's not my experience of it. I mean, I could see maybe if they were referring to like a preview, because there are moments in this movie that were clearly put in to be in the preview. There's a part where Nancy's on the phone. She's like, "Don't go to sleep." Like, that is. But
the whole nursery rhyme in general.
Yeah. But
it's this big secret, but yet all the kids in the neighborhood have a fucking double Dutch rhyme about the killer.
I will say this. We all have remarked on how, although a pretty young lady, like Nancy isn't typically Hollywood beautiful, and her friend Tina certainly fits the bill, especially I think in 1984, a lot more, right? And so I could see maybe in that way.
Oh, this was a big one for me as like a very little kid, because I had Tina, and then she played Beth in Better Off Dead, and Beth in Cheers. And then
she loved the name Beth.
And Better Off Dead, the Better Off Dead sequel that I wrote, that has still yet to be made. But no, the blonde, like sort of California 10 in a Midwestern town, I think is always a big deal.
And it's so clearly Craven's obsessed with it. So I could see if Psycho's the earliest one you could point to. Because he does it again with Drew Barrymore. He's like, but this time, what if we took a star?
Right.
And fucked with you even harder.
But see, that's what... on the thing that I was reading, I can't remember if it was an article or whatever it was, but like they were talking about he did it again with Drew Barrymore. It's hard to go back all the way back to 1996, and I hope I never have to. But did anybody think that Drew Barrymore was the main character of Scream and thought that she was making it out of that scene?
The preview was set up.
Yeah,
they hit it a lot,
That's
and they
so
set it up
crazy.
like. And she was big on the posters.
You need the
whole
context.
Yeah.
of the previews, and I think that it might be true for Nightmare on Elm Street, and
Mike,
we haven't
Greg.
seen it, but that really helps to. We don't realize that with trailers, but they create an environment that we see the movie in. And usually I think it's obviously very deleterious to the movie. It spoils things. It ruins things. But there's a way in which you set the audience up. And that's how they did. That's for sure how they did it in Scream. I was shocked when that happened in Scream.
Last night I saw what I found out was the second trailer for Alien Romulus and saw 2 characters of the group on the ship die.
Yeah.
Like, what the
That sucks.
fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
Leave it to our imaginations. It's a bummer thinking about Wes Craven. He did this in '84. Last House on the Left in the '70s was probably the big one, right? I know he did other things, but Last House on the Left, then Nightmare, then Scream in '96. Like, I do wish he kept being like, I can press those buttons again for New Generation with slight tweaks. Keep doing it, Wes. Why didn't you?
I know, and with Scream, the fact that it was written by like this young punk TV guy, horror fan,
Yeah.
quippy, the Kevin Smith of his generation, and then Wes Craven was like, "Oh, I'll do that." You know, like that's crazy. Like, no one else could do this but me, is what I'm sure he thought, and so he sent up and paid homage to his own movie, and it's particularly this one. Like, there are parts where the 4 kids are walking down the sidewalk, like coming home from school, and I just expect that dong song from Scream to come on.
You're right. And Johnny Depp, Skeet Ulrich is just that New Generation Johnny Depp crawling through the window. Their
He
faces
crawls
look very
through the
similar.
fucking window, Mike.
I mean, obviously, Fred Krueger is also the janitor at Scream, but just that hallway in general.
Yes.
And there's the creepy hallway scene. It looks like they built that school again for Scream. It was wild.
Out of rock and roll.
Out of rock and roll. They built this school from rock and roll. I think one of my biggest... I'm a Scream fan, right?
What?
And I love the first 2, and then they're bad in different ways, and I think it's because you don't have Craven after a while. I think he did do 3 and 4, but like, that's not Craven anymore. He was so close to death.
It's weird. It's weird how there's less Craven and yet they become more Craven.
Ryan,
Because his name means cowardice.
it does. Ryan, can we now gently mention some of the effects that, with all due consideration, did not maybe live up to what they hoped? Because you have to imagine this, America. The pitch behind this movie is, I'm going to make a horror movie for $1 million, and the bad guy is basically a cartoon character, so he can use cartoon character logic anytime he wants, including like changing the dimensions of his body. Okay, but we don't have the budget for these things. Like, that's not a budget premise.
but
the idea that the bad guy is a cartoon character, unless you're animating.
Isn't there something
He really
though
only
about
does
you
that
that like
once, right?
invigorates you, especially somebody who like spent a little bit of time in your past like working on no budget things to just see how they did it?
Yeah.
Is there something that like is exciting about that?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
lengthening his arms is one thing that like people argue about. Like, does that look good or does that look bad?
Yeah,
does
I
he
think that
lengthen
looks
his
bad.
arms?
And I do think that the idea of like, can't you appreciate the effort? I can. Yeah, and that's why I'm saying like, can we gently poke fun at
Well, there is. I will tell you this before you both start. There is one thing, and you guys can have a free for all. But there's one thing that if you talk about it, you will lose 3 points.
Okay.
Shit.
But
I'm
no,
going to not
please,
talk
go
about
ahead.
the thing I was going to talk about. What I think the cartoon works is him cutting his body open. Because again,
Oh,
it's
God,
dream, it's
yeah.
creepy, it's his whole like, well, I'll torture them first. It's disgusting. And he just heals right away. My issue, and man, I hope this isn't me losing 3 points, is at no point in the movie until the very end has it ever showed that he can transmorgify into a different object. But then there's a Freddy mobile?
That's no, that is not the thing.
Mike.
Thank
But
God.
it's so fucking rad. I think like
It's
because I know how iconic the sweater is now.
Right.
40 years later. I don't know how iconic it was by the end of the movie that you were watching.
yeah, they really think they did something.
There was such good branding of like, no, you see those red and black stripes? That's fucking Freddy time.
I'm sorry though. I think the 1-2 punch of the car and then the dummy mom getting vacuum sucked into the porthole window, like it was just so goofy.
I thought
Wait, hold on.
Greg.
No.
Yeah.
it was the getting sucked into the door
It
thing.
absolutely was.
Because I will say this, I thought the car thing looked dope because the image of a car driving away and then all the passengers clawing at the window and screaming, that is like one of the scariest.
Oh,
I think that is scary. I think it just is the roof that I'm like, what?
But that's the thing. That's why this movie is such a mindfuck because you get to the very, very end of it, and you realize you've had a very literal idea of what Freddy can do. He can run after you and he can stab you. But what the very last part of the movie identifies is that he can completely control your reality.
Right.
And then he can make you think something completely different is going on. Like, is this guy a ghost or is he a demon? Like, he has it seems like he has limitless power in this world.
He took the pill from Limitless.
And they're Inception style. They're in a dream, in a dream, in a dream, in a dream, in a dream.
Oh,
I don't know
sure.
if there's any level of reality in this movie that is not actually a dream created by. I just find that exciting and fun.
And I think that one word that I've seen people use, and I'm gonna shout out Josh Larson, the other host from Film Spotting that did not come on
the one
show.
who declined to come and be on the show.
And this is one of his favorite movies of all time. Is Lynchian. Is that your attempts to figure out what is real and what is not is laughable to the director.
Right. Because he doesn't even care.
I think that's a bridge too far. I think that Lynch has a little bit more control than Craven does on Lynch's movies about what is real and what is not. Or maybe he doesn't. I mean, if you read or listen to interviews with Lynch, he doesn't seem to know about anything that's going on.
He does not seem to care.
But the one thing
about what is real.
The one thing that I have seen Josh and other people point out is that no matter when you see the three girls, the scariest part of the movie that you see multiple times, jump roping in their little white dresses, singing the Freddy song, they are always in slow motion, even when you know for a fact that you're in a reality.
Yeah.
So even in the beginning of the movie, when we think that Freddy, there's nothing to do with Freddy, and we have not entered Dreamland yet, you're still it's still messed up.
You're never out. I don't think you're ever outside of dreams in this. And I think those little girls are a major clue.
It's all a dream
about that. And normally that would bug me, but I think that for one thing, the movie doesn't take pains to make sure that you totally understand that. I think you could definitely leave this movie not coming away with that conclusion and just being like, hey, I had a good time.
And dream stuff in movies are annoying, and when they're trying to be and they made so much character breakthrough because they saw their own dreams. This movie doesn't try to do that, so it doesn't. So Mike. It works because it's just no, dream rules mean I can do whatever I want, and isn't that fun and scary?
I think if you're a great screenwriter, what you do is you have your character have a dream where he was talking to a therapist, and then you can just get everything out of the way for the character.
Have that character open a book. The numbers and words are all over the place. That's how he learns he's in a dream. Batman, the animated series.
You know what was a good effect? It was both creepy and I thought well done. And weirdly creepy because so much of this stuff is a big hole opens up and blood pours out of it. You're okay, that's scary, obviously, but that's not super creative. But remember the part where she's going upstairs and the stairs are super
the goop
spongy?
Stairs.
That feels like an actual nightmare style thing, and I thought that played really well. It both looked good and was very scary within the movie.
I also read that
because he's chasing her. So how do you do the you can't really run and sort of visualize that was dope.
I also read that Wes and Heather Langenkamp have different stories about what those stairs were made of, which freaks me out. I think that they told her one thing, and that was not the case. Real quick, before we have to get out of here.
Was it real skeletons, just like Poltergeist?
We've talked exactly. We've talked a lot about what Freddy became, but if this was the only nightmare movie, is he an effective villain? Where he's in dreams, and he seems to have powers, and when he's out of dreams, he's a fucking goofball. Is he... I think that talking about what scared you is kind of weird. I want to talk about, were you interested to see how this all wrapped up?
Yeah, I think how goofy, because he hasn't had limbs in so long, is an interesting dichotomy. He is all powerful if you're in his world, but he's just kind of a out of shape dude if he's in your world. And then clearly... Another thing Craven would become obsessed with, because Scream was all about what about these goobers who don't know how to fight? What if they were killers?
Right. And him stepping in fire and then leaving fire prints all throughout the house.
So
that's good shit, dude.
A underrated special effect is when you're calling your mom and trying to say you're at a loud airport and using a tape deck, but then it goes haywire, which is also kind of nightmarish.
Hell yeah.
That is true.
I think here's why I think he's a good villain. It's a space that is, I think, kind of not explored that much. I think he is a kind of Joker-ish villain in that, he is doing really, really terrible things, but then...
And the playing with the toys, playing with the food thing.
Yeah. But they're obviously very different as well. And so it kind of gives him a unique space. And there is something interesting about at the end of all the horror, the goofiness being at the end of that. And it, like how weird that is then to find goofiness and horror in the same place. And I think that it's good that this character exists. It's an interesting idea. It's an interesting take. It didn't make the movie as scary as it possibly could have been. But on a deeper level, it kind of, I don't know, it's more unsettling maybe.
Greg.
I almost sort of think or wonder that all those people that were hoping that Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees won, because like that's just sort of the way that a lot of horror fans watch horror. Now you can't, right? Now that you see Freddy out of his element, you're like, all right, come on, Nancy. You got to do this.
Yeah.
Because fuck this child killer who probably did, we hope. Maybe.
Yeah, I definitely think he did. Like with using only the text of this film, I think
Yes.
it's still pretty clear that I don't think he deserved like to be burned to death, but I think that the movie does a good job of posing that question, right?
Well, I don't think you should burn him to death because you will give him supernatural powers that.
Oh, yeah.
That's a really, really good point.
That's
literally.
why you don't vigilante
There's a good chance I
justice.
learned nothing from this movie.
Although, should we burn each other to death to see if we get those supernatural powers?
Dibs. Nose goes. I'll go first, guys.
If I had dream powers, it would be a very different movie.
Would it be a wet dream?
I guess it would be like that other movie you were talking about. Yeah.
Wait, what are the finger knives in that one? Don't tell me. I'll find
Extra
out myself.
fingers.
Super long fingers.
We got to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to do a classic movie of the year tradition. A time-honored tradition here at Movie of the Year is towards the end of the season, we will say, what if this podcast, Movie of the Year, took place in the year that we were discussing? That year is, of course, 1984. I'll be your host, Ryan, and I will bring on two panelists with me to discuss this. What if there was a Greg, Mike, and Ryan in 84 doing the show? How do we keep that joie de vivre, that Champs-Élysées that we are so good at? So we're going to recast the podcast, and we're going to start with Ryan. Greg, who should Ryan be?
All right. We need someone who is a leader. He's probably going to have to corral basically a child and essentially a hysterical woman. He's going to have like strength, but also charisma. And he's going to have to be able to deliver one-liners. And who's the man for this job? Obviously, it's Harrison Ford.
Oh, wow.
So, Ryan, that's when I look at you, that's what I see, Harrison Ford. And not the one from Shrinking where he's so old. But the one from Indiana
84?
Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Oh, where he's so built?
Where he's young. Yeah, and where and remember, guest and friend of the show, CG, had very complimentary things to say about him. So then I'm kind of banking my compliment off of that.
I'd like... Typically, as the host and the point giver, I'm so nervous that you guys are going to kiss my ass, but that was so realistic and true. I appreciate it.
Right? That's the key. You can say super sappy things as long as they're true.
Mike, who's the 84 Ryan?
A little try-hard brown nosy for my taste. I think if you need a Ryan, you're gonna who's unorthodox but gets the job done. Quick-witted. The more you think about it, he is a sex pot. But that's not the first thing you think. You just think hilariously funny and takes over no matter what. It's Axel Foley is mine.
That's as much kissing ass.
What? No, why?
Oh, man. When you said Axel, I thought you were going to say Axl Rose, which also would have been an incredible pick. I love... Do I have to give up hosting for next season?
This is
amazing.
Unfortunately, you don't get to carry it on.
You spend 16, 19, 24 hours of podcast recording just to get 2 minutes of compliments.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Yeah.
Those are both good. I would say somebody who, absolutely decimates everyone in their path with their charm, their charisma, and their purple. It's Prince. I would just say that I am the Prince of 2024.
To be fair, I have seen you once throw a guitar in the air and it just never came back down.
Well, no, I just didn't catch it. It came back down hard. I just walked away, and it
gotcha.
landed on children. Harrison Ford, Axel Foley, and Prince. Wow, that is so hard to judge. But
murderer's row.
I'm going to give it to Mike. That's,
Mike.
Did you say Ricky Ricardo? Is that who you
I
said?
did say Ricky.
I watched the 2024 Axel F or whatever. That laugh is not part of his like repertoire anymore.
No, he said it was. He got made fun of in what he said a racist way by David Spade, and said he would not be doing it anymore.
Oh, really?
Is that a specific black laugh? I didn't realize that.
According to David Spade, I guess. I don't know.
Honestly, I'm not going to advance this at all.
No,
move on?
Smart.
All right, Mike. Greg is going back. We need the 84 Greg. Who is that?
So talented and knowing how to work the room and the system in ways maybe other people don't. And as how once described by Greg, a dusty bitch. Greg is Salieri. So seethingly jealous. Because of you, Greg, I've called everything in my way a dusty bitch.
A dusty bitch. It's like, it's so deeply insulting. Why are they dusty?
Also loves candy.
Loves candy.
Yeah.
A fiend for candy. Not many other vices.
But then the candy is like nightmarish. Mascarpone and a carob chip or whatever that was.
And I would say that Greg is great at podcasting, but it's funny when he's around musicians because he's like, "Oh, I could do that just as good."
Yeah, but I can't. Oh.
All right, I will go next. Greg, I think that despite not being the host of the season, is the father figure, the person that we look up to. He dresses the nicest and the warmest. It's Bill Cosby. I think that this is when Cliff Huxtable.
No, you can't do this.
What? I'm talking about 1984. I'm not talking about anything that we learned about since then. I just think that it's Bill Cosby is the Greg that I see.
Ryan, we have a lot of fun here, but this is.
If you are younger than we are, you might not like realize what Bill Cosby was.
Then that's what the Bill Cosby I mean.
A comedic giant, a good man, and this like incredible fall because it turns out he's a monster. I mean, so he's worse than a Fred Krueger. But what I'm trying to capture here is just like how the heights from which he fell, like how important he was to culture.
Much different than the heights that like Eddie Murphy fell when we talked about him on the Beverly Hills Cop episode.
Yes.
Bill Cosby fell much further.
Yeah.
Greg, who's your Greg?
Okay. Well, hard to follow that. But you're talking Greg, you need someone hairy. You need somebody pure of heart. You need somebody maybe has a little bit of a wild side occasionally, right? You need somebody who's liable to keep himself company, sing a little song. I am Gizmo from Gremlins.
Oh, he's so cute.
A cute little furry guy. Never did no harm to anybody.
A reverse Cosby.
Should be said. I am the sweater. I'm like, it's part of me.
I'm the one that gets the drink poured on me. Well, I don't like to typically do this and recast the podcast, but I'm going to give Greg to Greg. Saying Gizmo.
Oh, I think Greg just earned a new nickname.
Gizmo.
Or Greg to Greg.
I would love to be called Gizmo because that is also what Matt Berry calls Guillermo in What We Do in the Shadows. He calls him Gizmo. And Guillermo became like the best part of that show.
Jumping off of Greg's Greg, I'm going to say that I look at Greg and I look at Mike and I look at them as like two sides of the same coin. One is super sweet and does really nice things and hums a pleasing tune.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what it was?
No.
It's like, ooh. Oh, that's good. Yeah, you got to get that like burr in
like
there.
Aquaman.
Yeah.
And then you put a little bit of water in Greg and you get Mike, who is Stripe from Gremlins.
Ah, Stripe.
I'll take it.
Will you? You sick son of a bitch. Mike, you're up. No, Greg, you're up. Who's
I'm
Mike?
up. Mike is the kind of person that straight men look and go, what's this? Some sort of fairy? And women look and go, what's this? A total pee destroyer? And that is exactly like Prince. Every man looks at Prince and is like, who is this little guy? Who cares about this? And then their girl is like, that's the sexiest man who ever lived. And I would run away to ride upon his corpse. You fool. And Mike, I think that captures you.
Thank
Mike's
you so
favorite color
much.
is purple. He wears it a lot.
He does wear
do wear a lot of
purple
purple.
all the time.
And also poops in a weird way where he calls it purple rain. I don't understand. Mike,
touched.
who's your Mike?
I think. Okay.
Did you ask your wife or anybody for help with this, or
No.
That would be cheating,
Not at all.
obviously.
That would be cheating. I
You
went
can
to
go to-
Google Hill.
Yeah, I went to Google Hill, Control F my
Who
thoughts.
is Mike Gravano 84? When I think people think of Mike, it's at first glance, who is this scrappy, bummy, kind of maybe creep douche? And then the more you get to know him, you're like, oh, he's actually like pretty skilled and good at fighting and was in the military. It's Kyle Reese. I'm Kyle Reese.
Oh my god. Father of the savior of the universe, hopefully one day.
Has sex exactly one time.
Puts
That
his-
doesn't really fit with my answer, though.
So I'm the most
That's true.
difficult to
You gotta
pin
pay
down.
attention.
It's a very different picture.
Oh, okay. So we have Prince, Reese, and Stripe.
Damn.
Yeah, you can tame multitudes, my dude.
I am going to go with Prince.
Hey, in your face, Mike.
Just because it's hard to give myself another point for saying Stripe, so I'll say Prince. So your 1984 Movie of the Year podcast, talking
I would
about
listen to
movies
the
from
shit out of that.
1942,
That's
is
upsetting.
Axel Foley, Prince, and Gizmo.
Come on.
Them, Prince and Eddie Murphy talking about probably being a celebrity more than the movie, and Gizmo just going, bright lights, bright
Yeah,
lights.
just like. Why does he keep saying that?
Turn off the lights, you idiot.
He really squints a lot. Why is he doing that?
That's Recast the Podcast when we come back on Nightmare on Elm Street. Because we haven't talked about Reagan in 10 minutes or so, let's do it now. Is Freddy a creation of Reaganism, showing a monster attacking our suburbs? Like, that's the bad guy ruining our perfect whiteness? Or is it against Reaganism? And yes, we'll get to everyone else's half-baked thematic theories in a minute. But is this movie well done?
Well, throat goat.
Freddie
I
is
think
for sure.
Because he's burnt.
Well
till
done,
crisp.
because he was
I
burned.
got it. I like
He's
it.
a burn victim.
I think it's anti-Reaganism because, yes, maybe Freddy is the antagonist of the movie, but as we talked about, the parents in suburbia is actually the villain because they want nobody. The parents, when they get big Johnny Depp's parents' biggest problem with Nancy is that she's acknowledging the murders that are happening and isn't just trying to move on.
Yes.
I mean,
So
isn't this movie
Mike.
in its way like sort of like 15 years before American Beauty, trying to do what American Beauty did, or in the roughly the same time trying to do what Blue Velvet did, a David Lynch movie of just showing that like, no, these suburbs are not fucking great.
I mean, they cut
Right.
to that dad who is watching Nancy get changed. And again, Nancy is never like shown as like sexy or an ingenue or anything like that. She's shown as a child because she
Greg.
is. And he's like watching her get changed. His wife catches him doing this and basically like
See anything good?
lightly jokes with
Yeah.
him. Yeah. And then he's like, I don't want that girl near our son.
right.
And that little snippet of I am like sexually attracted to this child.
But putting it under the guise of like, oh, I'm protecting
I'm
my family.
judging, yeah, and I'm protecting my own family by scolding her. That like it's pretty textual. It's not subtext really. It's pretty textual. But I think that's very much captures like that feeling. And I think that there's just one example of how adults in this are actively like almost as bad as Freddy. The mom is either Nancy's mom is either
Right.
such a drunk and so clueless that she's actively harming her daughter, or she is like actively attempting to harm and
Right.
to,
Summoned him back, and that's why she has the
kind
glove
of
or some shit.
Yeah,
Like,
that's why she has the glove. That's why she locks Nancy in the house.
What kind of dad or cop do you have to be to lose custody to a mom like Nancy's mom?
yeah.
It is the 80s though, and I mean I think that like back then it just automatically custody
Yeah.
went to the mom, but not if you could be like she's a drunk.
I think we handled the suburban stuff a lot, so I want to get to this. How is this movie doing anything with its references to religion? Or is that just stuff in there to make things creepier? Which we know that Bibles are added to make stuff scary.
Yeah, have you read that last chapter? It's terrifying. It's. I think it's kind of just there. Like, she has the crucifix. Freddy collects it later to prove, like, it didn't actually have power. It's part of his weird little, like, pervert creep things on the people he kills. He steals something from everybody. But there isn't that much. It feels like very shallowly there. Just the imagery. It's not talked about enough. It's not really even dealt with enough to, I think, really mean anything.
I will say it's kind of like I'm kind of playing off of Mike's answer, but its meaninglessness is, I believe, the meaning behind it. And maybe that's a cop-out, and it probably is. Again, one of the weaknesses of this movie, I think, is that it lays a lot out and then doesn't connect it in as interesting ways as it could, which leaves you to do it, which is a fun experience, but I just feel like it could do more to help us out. But I do think that the fact that religion actually doesn't factor into this at all is a very bleak message about what Wes Craven thinks about religion in general. It's something you can do in between the nightmares if you want, but don't expect that it's going to affect anything.
Well, especially if you're talking about Reagan's 80s and the moral majority and all these, these suburban folks are all talking about Christian and be like, oh, I can't believe an atheist or a Muslim moved into town.
But then they're not good.
But they're not good people at all. They're perving on their boyfriends, their son's girlfriend and all that kind of shit.
Their goodness is just, it lasts so long as to say, I'm a Christian.
Right.
And so once I say that, I could sort of get away with anything.
And that makes it fantastical because Christians nowadays and in real life are such good people.
I mean, so many people now like identify fervently with Christianity, but that's like a political stance. It's not really like related to the Bible or anything. They're not even they don't actually like people say they're more religious than ever and go to church less than they ever have before.
And then, their stances of like, well, I think this because I'm Christian is like, oh, based on what page of the Bible.
And
and their response is always, fuck you.
Shut up.
I do think that the last scene of the movie when Nancy walks out of the bedroom, but then is standing outside the front of the house, and then it's like super bright. It's way too bright. Gizmo would be freaking out. I do think there's a way in which that's almost shot as if it's heaven. Everyone wears white. It's so bright. And so I think that that's one last little like emptiness of heaven, because there's actually, it's like, no, you're in the bad place. You're not in the good place.
Ted Danson said that one.
Light spoilers for the show The Good Place.
That's what that show is
in the
about?
preceding statement.
Do you guys want to talk about, before we get to speed round, usually I don't warn you that speed round is coming.
Usually you don't ask us if we want to talk about the subjects.
But do you guys want to talk any more about the dream stuff? We haven't really focused on it. It's just been dropped in. But like, I think we've done all of the stuff about how there is no offer on switch, I think, for this movie.
It was all a dream, as I once said.
Yeah, I really feel like it could be hack to say the whole thing is a dream or it ends in a dream or anything. But for this one movie that seems to be engaging so wholeheartedly with dreams, I feel like it works. It gets away with it.
Especially like true nightmares. And there's those horrifying dreams where you do wake up 8 times and you're asleep each one of those 8 times are fucking exhausting and paralyzing. Like it's pretty dope.
I do think that there is something with this dream thing that, like, if you were to watch Nightmare and Blue Velvet back to back, there's something going on where, like, you could say that Wes Craven is very talented, but not yet skilled enough or something. Just keep going back to the thing that Greg goes back to about the whole, they just don't tie together. Lynch's don't, but they do somehow in a way that, like, is so inexplicable to me that he's just not there yet. And then I think later on in his career loses interest in. Like, I don't want to do that thing anymore. He wants to do more things where movies where everything ties together more evenly. But those movies, Blue Velvet and Nightmare, are very neck and neck at the time, I think. Speed round. His hideous face, his evil presence, his general bad vibes. How does Johnny Depp do in his premiere movie?
It sucks to see him, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Doesn't
it, folks?
And I feel like he hadn't totally developed his charms yet, although I think he's probably one of the more charming parts of this movie.
I wouldn't watch this movie and notice this guy's got talent or charm.
But I think he's a fine teen actor. Like, there's worse, and there's only a few, but there are definitely worse teen actors in this movie than Johnny Depp. I think he nails, especially because he also looks young like Nancy. When he's a prick, you're like, well, he's young.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't even know. And then when he's like good, you're like, oh, he's becoming like a good person, which is only in a movie. Of course, we've learned now.
It's so funny the way she like keeps saying to him, like,
Mike.
"You're failing me. You're failing
Yeah.
me." Like, and he's like, "I'm also just 17. It's your parents that are really failing you." Like, what do you? I have to sleep
Right.
sometimes.
Also, he invented my current life, being left to my own devices, where he is in bed with the chunkiest TV and the chunkiest headphones,
yeah.
listening to the chunkiest music that you've ever heard.
I love the stuffiness of 84
Yeah.
movies. Not to say that they are stuffy, but that like every shot is festooned with like purchasable items.
Like that
Great.
scene from Fight Club where you can see the price tag.
Yes,
as if
yeah.
it's
Yes,
the entire time.
consumerism.
Why is Freddy Krueger scary sounding, but Fred Krueger goofy sounding?
The second act of this movie, they've been calling him Freddy, and they will in the end call him Freddy. But there is a solid 25 minutes where he is only known as Fred Krueger.
Well,
and it
that's how
gives
you know
me
they're serious.
Yeah.
Fred, stop fucking around.
I guess that's to really
Frederick Mark Krueger.
to really drive home that it was a human, like it was a person that
Right.
existed.
I mean, to call somebody Freddy is like diminutive, right? Like,
Yeah.
Right.
We're treating you like a child, but Fred Krueger does your taxes. Freddy Krueger kills you in your nightmares.
And lets you go to prison for tax evasion.
What about the soundtrack in this movie? We talked a little bit about the synth sound and how Dreamweaver inspired it, but does it go too hard or not hard enough?
No, both at once, man. It goes so hard sometimes.
Mike.
And then for 15 seconds, then it's like, silence. We're done with that for a while. Like, he's like, ba, 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 ba.
I feel like at times it is used to ratchet up the tension, but I do feel like there's times where, like Freddy Krueger himself, it actually does more to like make things seem zany, and maybe it's because he's literally on the screen being zany at that moment. But it does a very good job of being a barometer for the mood of the movie. But I have been loving these soundtracks, even when they're doing hardly anything. Just the synth. I am such a big fan of having synth under everything.
I do think
Great.
part of why Stranger Things took off so much now
Yeah.
that we've been stuck in the 80s is because synth rules.
Return to synth.
I've been to so many of those concerts or performances where they show a movie, but they delete the soundtrack, and then a live orchestra plays the soundtrack. And those are always like John Williams movies. But I'd
Yeah.
like to see one of these 80s synth movies where a guy's just like running all over the place trying to hit all the keyboard notes at the right time.
I went to one of those, and the conductor just happened to be my childhood friend. It was the weirdest thing.
Was it
I didn't
Freddy Krueger?
realize-
It was
I
an
didn't
accident?
realize it was
No, it
going
was
to be
Fred.
him. It was Fred Kruegs.
Is this the most mainstream ACAB horror movie?
I was shocked for 84, the police are only incompetent or outright malicious.
They
They-
never do anything correct.
They only show up after the fact.
Mike.
They're never there like while something is happening or before something happens. And then they just stand around shrugging.
If you say something bad is happening in that room, they'll fight you. And if
Yeah.
you say something bad is happening to me right now, they will just stare at you with their thumb up their butt.
Nancy is literally screaming at the top of her lungs for the last 10 minutes of the movie, "Please get my dad." And after about 10 minutes, one of the cops looks up the window and he goes, "I guess we better get him."
And the reason is because they pull the 80s card. This only works in the 80s, where she says, "Get my dad, asshole."
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh, fuck." She said the A word. How offended were you when Nancy said, "Oh, God, I look 20 years old"?
I turned to dust.
Yeah, broke
And
my
I
heart.
blew away because I'm over 20 years older than that. So, like, she can't even fathom the age I am. And she's right. I'm a lich compared to her. I'm
all of the
You
parents
walking
were
in,
younger
she
than
would
you.
run to Freddy to
Yes.
save her from how we all
yes,
look.
yes.
Mike.
Walking in is generous, probably lurching in, right?
That speed round. When we come back, let's give Nightmare all the awards it didn't get in the past. Nightmare on Elm Street was nominated for 0 awards, but won 1. So I appreciate that. That was probably Fred Krueger's doing.
In your dreams.
Bitch. We're going to give it 5 awards tonight, but before we do that, we're going to recommend something based off its back, Greg.
Okay. I am not a huge fan of horror, and so I don't have a ton of examples for horror, but my go-to example for great horror that is really a deep mind fuck as well, and that's, I think that what gets me excited about this movie is that there's a whole level on which it is a mental game that Freddy is playing, and that the viewer doesn't even realize the extent of that until it's all completely over, and then you're kind of left like stuck. So that same sort of like mental confusion mixed with horror, I'm going to go with the book by Jeff Vandermeer, Annihilation. Annihilation it's never clear what's going on because it's like much more Lovecraftian horror. It is about the beauty of becoming something new and how that is also horrible and terrible. And there's moments in it where you feel, as the reader, you feel like you're starting to go a little crazy, and that like somehow the book is coming out into your reality or something.
But not like a fun pop-up book.
No, not like a fun pop-up book. Like if you remember the first season of True Detective, they talk about a play called The King in Yellow, which is supposed to the idea is supposed to be a play that makes people go mad when they read it. Annihilation, there are parts where you're reading it where you're like, I'm not sure this is good for my sanity. This is making me feel weird.
Mikey, what do you got?
There is a poetry anthology, I also went literary, called Dark Ink, a poetry anthology inspired by horror movies. And the collection in general, like Nightmare, goes from actually terrifying to super dumb and goofy. But there is specifically in there a poem by the LA writer Eric Morago about an older Nancy who takes sleeping pills because she's so sick of her now suburban life that she's like, I'm diving back into Freddy's world. And it's sick. I cannot remember the name of the specific poem right now, but check out Dark Ink.
Eric Morago. I remember that name.
Should we have talked about Terminator more tonight? You did bring her up, right? Or you brought up Sarah Connor. There's like a real Terminator vibe in here where I could see why Nancy would grow up and feel that way, right? She's like a hero in this. She saves herself. And
I didn't bring up Sarah, but Mike brought up how he's like Kyle Reese.
That's true. I remember that. I remember he said he's good at fighting.
Yeah.
In a way that would surprise you.
I went a different way than you dorks. I do think that Nightmare is a milestone movie in that, kind of like I always talk about A New Hope is, like everything that A New Hope referenced, that becomes now the new reference point. I think Nightmare is similar, like it is because of Halloween, but once Nightmare comes out, we get a bunch of rip-offs of that. And I do want to point out what I think is the best and the most enduring and sort of does everything a little bit better as far as having this character who is both scary and comical in ways that Freddy never figured out, and that is the original Child's Play. I think that Chucky may have passed at this point Freddy up on the iconic scale, and he's a hero to most. I just think that I can't believe that he's still getting iterations at this point.
He's
TV.
Isn't there actively a Child's Play TV show on one of the streaming networks or something? And it's like a whole Chucky verse. And it's I saw 5 minutes of one of the episodes, and I was like, I'm way too lost in the sauce to understand what's going on.
I mean, think about that. I don't understand the Chucky verse enough to continue watching this episode. That's a crazy thing that you went through.
Chucky was president. And I was like,
oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I was like, this is too much for me to handle.
That was sort of our reality. I'm going to give that one to Mike for mentioning Eric Morago. Greg, 84 Fit. What is the most 84 thing that you saw?
I'm going to go, for so much of this, I've been picking out what would walk the runway in 84, right? And so we're talking about these really big dramatic looks and everything. But when I saw Nancy's cabled white sweater, Jordache jeans, and just Converse kicks with basically no makeup, the hair just kind of thrown together.
I'm just going to the mall.
Very natural brow, kind of like a natural frizz to the hair, not the perm. To me, I was like, wow, this person just walked out of a picture from the 80s. It's not exciting, it's not groundbreaking, but this is what folks really looked like. It was not the neon and the headbands and everything.
And I wish I could go back to her and say that, Nancy, your eyebrows will go incredibly out of fashion and then come back
roaring
hard.
Back
you
in.
have no idea. Mike, what do you
got? Glenn, played by a young Johnny Depp, is wearing a sports jersey cropped top.
Yes.
He is showing that belly in his crop top. And that, I think very similarly, it's not what people think of when they think of the 80s. We all forget that men wore crop tops and we should bring them back. And I think that weird shirt is doing it.
I really like the way it's the most generic jersey possible.
It says basketball on the front.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I'm going to give that to Greg, though, because, it's just...
Greg.
This is just this is... it's not active wear, but I'm going to go to the mall. I'm going to go to In-N-Out or wherever. This is my daily outfit. Music moment, Greg.
Okay, so very early in the movie, Mike pointed this out. Very early in the movie, Nancy's like, "Okay, I think I figured this out. I'm gonna have to track this guy down in my dream. Glenn, could you stay awake while I do this and hang out with me?" And then she begins like just kind of like walking around Universal Studios in her dreams. And one of my favorite parts of the movie is Glenn pops out from a plant and she's like, "Are you watching me?" And he's like, "Yeah."
No, but like for business reasons.
Yeah, and then he goes back into the plant. But the music is very subdued during this part, and it's really like building up the tension. And what it is really is it's kind of the soundtrack deconstructed, so you only hear elements of it at one time, and so it's kind of like an emptier, more background sound. And then it builds and builds and builds until she like encounters Freddy again. And I really like that part.
Mikey?
One of the rare times we get a traditional chase in the movie, it's towards the end, and Freddy pops out of somewhere and goes, "I'm here," I think in the boiler room, and then just like the hardest the 80s synth has gone, it's like 80s synth blast beats, blah, 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 blah. And this is when Nancy runs, and then it stops because she gets stuck in the goopy stairs we were talking about earlier. So it's just like a 15-second blast of synth to your face, and then stops because she gets stuck.
I wish I could just kill you, Nancy. But what I can do is make those stairs goopy.
It's clear that Freddy can't always think of stuff to do or say. So sometimes he pops up and he's just like, "Hi!"
Yeah, like
Line.
That's me as like a D&D player. It's just like, I'm sure there's something cool I can do, but like I'm gonna make it rain cupcakes. No, that's Greg. That was incredible dissection of that scene. Mike, cringiest moment.
I think we even talked about this already, but we've seen this actress act well in Nashville. And yet, when asked to, "Hey, you're an alcoholic mom, drink this drink," in such a cartoonish, stupid fucking, like, flipping it upside down, the way...
Like a middle school play.
Yes, a middle school
alcohol.
Play of pretend
She
to drink
says,
as like a
glug,
don't just
glug,
say
glug.
no. Glug, 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 glug.
Drink, 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 drink.
It's annoyingly bad.
She, maybe we can call this like Alec Guinness theory, but I do think that looking back, Alec Guinness was really good in Star Wars, despite the fact that he didn't want to be there. This is like, I'm Ronnie Blakely. I'm so above this, but goddamn, I could not believe what I was watching. And in a horror movie, we're like, you can't afford great actors. You have to get whatever you can out of them. This was terrible. We can like note Heather Langenkamp's first performance as like sometimes a little off, but I think overall she did a great job. This was awful. Greg, what's the cringiest moment?
Yeah, Nancy found a real like true place. So
Yeah.
she has like some bad reads of lines, but I think she found a very like true emotional place.
I was so
there.
ready to blame the screenplay anytime it was awkward when I was
Yeah.
watching
Yeah.
her.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. Which one am I doing? I'm sorry.
Cringy.
Okay, we just talked about it a second ago, but the way she says, "My God, I look 20," it's not. It took me back to before I was 20. Like when I was 16, 20 did seem old.
Right.
And then it like recontextualized. I just had a birthday. It recontextualized how old I actually am. And man, I did not feel so good, Mr. Stark, and I just blew away.
I'm going to give that one to Mike because Ronnie Blakely, if you are signing on for this movie, you know how to drink. I guarantee you. And you are not doing it correctly. Let's go for pound performance, Greg. And a couple of stars in this one. I don't know where this is going to go.
I'm going to say Fred Krueger. Because what is unique is this guy's... what's his name? Robert Englund? Mm-hmm. What is unique is his take on this character. You know, like, we've got, like, the emptiness of Michael Myers, and that's scary in one way. Jason always seems particularly vindictive and as like a scary undead nonstop monster. Freddy is so goofy and so disturbing, but the things he does really are very terrifying, and I think it's down to this guy's performance of really making us believe that he is playing a child. Not just killer, too. The movie only says child killer, but he seems creepier than that. And that's all I'll say on that topic.
But like I was watching this and in my office away from my 3-year-old, but my 3-year-old was listening and she was like, "Is Daddy in that room?" Because it's either stupid ass lines or just like him saying like, "Ow, fuck."
Yeah.
And that's how I walk around my house.
Watching him bumble around in the real world, that was another dimension to Fred Krueger I didn't expect.
Mike, who should take this down?
I think, again, you try to avoid the stars, but sometimes the stars are the only really good actors in it. And yeah, Heather Langenkamp. And it specifically, I think when she hits peak is when it is the get my dad, you asshole. And so far, so many times the high emotion is when somebody would stumble. And I think her yelling at Glenn or yelling at the cops is when I was like, no, she fucking gets it. She's a frustrated teenager who's smarter than everybody else in this one-horse town. And she sells that.
I have to agree. I don't know. I don't think of her as the star, honestly. I do think of her, Robert Englund as the star, but I'm going to give that to Mike. I thought she did an incredible job. Mike, director's signature moment. Have you heard of this person before?
Wes Craven? No, what else has he done?
Scream.
He ripped off my favorite movie a lot, Scream. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of things you could point out, right? Like you could be like, oh, well, the subject matter and Bad Parents and stuff like that. But there's a shot that like was subtle in a movie that is not, that like I've thought about a lot, that I think was super fucking cool and it was a weird decision. Nancy is running through the boiler room and on like a catwalk, and she goes down the ladder and then keeps running, and the camera has been following her, and it's like not like, oh look, somebody's watching her unsteady cam, but it's just like we don't have a budget for like a gimbal, so we're just holding it running after her. And then instead of following her down the ladder so you can clearly see her, it just like kind of stops and it's through the grating, and it feels like if you saw it in film school, you'd be like, well, that's wrong. You're hiding your actress. But like there's a way to do it that like, I don't know, it was super cool, and I've thought about it a lot.
And did you like, does that bring back stuff from Scream or?
Yeah, I think he is good at like, I don't know, put the camera through here for some reason. Like, and it's not the Mike, because Mike Myers is what I think of. Michael Myers, I'm sorry. Yeah. Halloween is what I think of the I'm watching you vision that a lot of slasher movies do. So it's not that, but it's just like, I'm going to make you like almost like The Office. Like, I'm going to put the camera in a way that you wouldn't expect it to be, because this is how a documentarian would put it. But they are not in a documentary, but he still is just like, well, I'm not chasing down the ladder after her.
Yeah, I mean, it is crazy that he does. His actors will do everything it takes to like make you know that you're watching a movie, right? They'll be ridiculous. They'll be campy. They'll say puns that aren't like, this is not the time for that. But then the camera work is much different than that. And so he's somehow combining John Carpenter and like the Zaz brothers all at the same time, which I think directly leads to Scream. Greg, what's your director signature moment?
I'm going to go with the first time we see an effect that John Carpenter obviously loves, which is the first time you see Freddy like pushing through the wall above Nancy's bed. And he does that, and then later he will like push up under the like, I guess under the sheet. It looks very like nylon at first, and then comes through. And then this is something that is reprised in some of the other Nightmare on Elm Street movies. And I remember there's a movie that Wes Craven made where like it's about the Freddy movies. It's not really
New Nightmare.
Yeah. And that happens in that one as well. And so whenever I see someone like, it seems like he's trying to reclaim the ghost costume. Right. As no, this is real. This is scary to have like a body lined in white. Like this is a scary thing. But especially that first time he pushes through the wall or the ceiling, you're not expecting that. And it's very creepy looking.
And the reason I appreciate stuff like that so much is because I think there's one jump scare in this where like Nancy's in bed and Freddy's like, still here.
Yeah.
And, like, they hit the synth as hard as they can. But that's kind of the only one. You know, like this movie really does stuff like this wall thing. And the reason I appreciate it so much is because this is fucking scary. But also, hey, main character, you've got like 3 seconds. You've got 4 seconds. You know, like if you can get your wits together, you can get out of here. But instead, you're going to stand there enamored by the scariness.
Yeah, it's those creepy images that I think really end up kind of sticking with you. And there's a few of them in this movie that, like, it's so much scarier than a jump scare because it's just like you kind of go back to it in your mind. It's unsettling. And that pushing through the wall thing is
right. Jump scares are never what make you have nightmares.
No,
those pushing through the wall, buckets of slow motion blood. A fun game you can play with yourself at home is when you're taking off your shirt, purposely get your head stuck in it and push your face and hands through it.
That is fun.
A bit I did every day for a year with a roommate. He never found it funny. I never stopped.
I hate to do this, but
Greg,
I feel like
Mike.
you guys watch the shit out of Wes Craven, so I'm going to give you guys both points. When we come back, we're going to... Oh, and my answer was ripping the mom through the window in the door, and it was just a mannequin. It was a mamakin at the very end of the movie, and that's to me.
We grew up with these like dummies,
and I love every one of them. To me, that's Wes Craven is like. I know that they're going to know that that's not Ronnie Blakely.
Yeah.
And yet I love doing this shit.
and like, it's not even totally clear that that is her mom. I mean, like, that might just be an empty husk that he created out of his imagination anyway. So. I would never denigrate that scene, Ryan. I thought it was really cool.
Appreciate you, Greg. When we come back, I'm going to total up the scores, which I think Greg just took the lead on.
That'd be awesome. I would love that.
And we'll see who won the Nightmare on Elm Street episode. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with me tonight and this entire season. My God, I know that we have like 3 or 4 more episodes
Thank you
to
for
do.
having us.
But this is the last movie.
This is it.
What?
This is the outro segment of the last movie. I'm being really weird about this one. I think I just enjoyed it so much. This was maybe the worst movie we did, and it was like so interesting and so much better than I thought it was going to be.
I was going to ask you, Mike. I was going to ask both of you, but now we have Greg's answer. What is the worst movie? We're going to figure out what is the best movie of 84. What do you think is the worst?
What is the worst movie? My superpower is I instantly forget the minute we
for
record.
you, Mike,
It's probably
how about
Paris, Texas.
How about Breaking 2, Mike?
Oh yeah,
Because you were
Breaking
not
2 is
really
worse than this.
Yeah, you were not really into that.
But I'm gonna go and skim through the list for a second to see, because again, we have 16 movies, so we do more than we used to, and I have a brain problem, so I cannot remember anything we've ever watched. But it would probably be Breaking 2. Everything else is so, and that is still enjoyable.
No,
There's still enjoyable moments for Breaking 2.
I love that movie.
For most of this season, it was like what was the delta between how good you expected or remembered it to be and how good was it really? Because most movies were so much better than I remembered or so much better than I expected that it's going to seriously come down to like how much better were you than I remembered.
Right.
I do have the scores. We'll figure out what the best movie is next week. And maybe the worst movie.
Let's just do it right now.
Mike, you scored 40 points. Greg scored 39.
Oh,
and
no.
was this a thing right at the end where Mike scored a point? I can't remember.
No, it was
that
the
was
opposite.
quite the opposite.
Okay.
So I would have lost by 2, but then instead I lost by 1.
Oh, we were so close to hilariousness. But yet another not hilarious show.
Yet another episode ends without anything funny happening.
So I guess that Nightmare, glad that you came. I think that Mike and I liked it a lot. Greg, I think likes it more now than he did when he came in this studio.
I think it's a movie that you like reflecting on more than you like watching. Maybe there's a lot that's really good in there. I definitely do think though. Yeah, I come away from this episode liking it a notch more than I did before.
Can I say this? Because we like to talk about baby steps, or like this is your gateway drug into something else. If you're not sure about Lynch, I would watch this movie first, and then maybe go to Blue Velvet, like just as a little baby step. Is that ridiculous?
I don't know. I think it makes a lot of sense.
No. Yeah. That's a cool, weird killer movie night.
Yes. To do Nightmare and Blue Velvet, I think would be awesome.
Yeah.
All right, guys. That's the 16 movies. When we come back next week, we are going to begin the, let's say 2-week, but it's probably a 3-week trial of trying to come up with what the best movie of the year from 1984 is. Also, we're going to hand out so many movies. We have new awards this year.
New awards?
Yeah.
Nudies.
Like best movie from 1984. That's one we're going to
I love it.
That is only one can get that, right?
No, I think, we'll give one that moody, and then we'll name a different movie.
A different one.
We're going to give out one called Best Boy and then one called Key Grip.
Sure. That's and then best Hollywood moment, which Flash going into the Flash Zone will definitely win. Thank you, Oscars, for that idea. But yeah, I think that's it. I'm nervous, but I'm ready. I'm going to start rewatching the movies.
Any advice for the listeners?
Just make sure that you go and subscribe and download and rate and review all of our shows. And and then one, I guess, other thing that I would say.
Okay.
Keep watching them movies.